All right. So USW Retaliation was the other night, this past Sunday, as was Extreme Rules. The only difference is I didn't really care for Extreme Rules. So I didn't, review it. But now I wanted to talk about Retaliation, the fact that it was a very non-USW-like show. And USW has been a confusing beast to tame over the past number of months. You can't really pinpoint exactly what they're trying to do. And originally, at the start back in March, it was easily chalked up to, oh well, they're holding a show in Chicago at the end of April. It's a big show. They somehow managed to get a near sellout, and they want to ensure that their product is best for not only the hardcore viewers, but also the casual viewers just tuning in for the first time. They want to leave an impact, and shut up. Rightfully so. Stop getting into that. Get off the fucking thing. Fucking idiot. Rightfully so. Oh my god. For the third time. Rightfully so, considering, USW is becoming more popular. It's growing, it's expanding, it's hosting another show in April of next year in San Diego. So understandably, you need to kind of change the way you go about business, because for the most part of the past 4 years or so, you've really just had the core demographic, the USW diehards, the guys that ended up watching WOW or started tuning in and began to cultivate what would become the diehard USW fan base. But now you're attracting casual viewers or even hardcore viewers to your product. So there was a big concern back in April and March of, this would they'd take some elements from it, but they wouldn't necessarily take away everything from what they usually did. They wouldn't switch away the way they did switch around the way they did business or the way that they booked shows, kind of shafting the diehards to, mend a platform for the casual viewers. But nobody really thought it would become any problem going forward. And not to say it's become a problem, but it's definitely, the product definitely feels less uniformed USW than it was at the start of the year. The 3 unbuttoned buttons at the top of the dress shirt of USW, and the slightly wrinkled cuffs of the dress shirt of USW have now been slightly ironed out, and one button has been buttoned up. It seems like it's becoming a little bit less like the USW we've been familiar with for the better part of the past 6 years since it got, since 6 years since the company started. So that was the big kind of question point. And it's just been a matter of, are we overdoing it? Are we looking too into this? Or are we hitting it right on the nose? And I think you got your answer with this past Sunday's Retaliation pay-per-view, because this was the least USW-like pay-per-view the company has produced in years. As a matter of fact, if anything, even though it's kind of cheating, it's probably the less USW-like show since the WOW reunion show in 2017. And at that point in time, that WOW show also still technically played into the USW, typical way of storytelling and putting on a show. This was very different. USW doesn't tend to have a lot of championship changes. We tend to have a lot of long reigns, and you get 1, 2 at most championship switches on a show. It's a very rare occurrence in comparison to everything else. And just on this show alone, you had literally every championship other than the USW Women's Championship on the Intensity brand switch hands, which is so unlike USW that many fans began to worry. And I am kind of amongst them because this does not feel like prototypical USW. I don't want to say I don't want to say it feels bad or it feels like a watered down version of the product because the pay-per-view was still really good. But it just didn't feel like the company. I'll get into it now. First match on the card was Ash versus Prophecy with Anarchy and Chain Reaction of Metric in his corner. Prophecy would win with a limb lock via submission, which I thought was a fairly I don't want to say pointless outcome because it's not pointless. It does something for Prophecy, who alongside Anarchy really needs something to stop feeling like the bottom of the barrel with Metric. But it does nothing but hurt Ash in the long run, who just 3 months ago was in the semi-main event of Call to Greatness for the World Heavyweight Championship. And now he's kicking off the show in the kickoff match. That is, I don't want to say a fall from grace because it's not like the stature on the card is indicative to your, quality of work. But it's definitely facing one of the guys that just tends to get overlooked in Metric is definitely not what a man 3 months removed from fighting for the World Heavyweight Championship should be involved with. So that was very weird, but at the same time, he did lose as well. So you not only had Ash kind of be relegated to facing a lower mid-carder, because that's what Prophecy is at this point, let's just be honest with ourselves, but you also had him lose. So that does nothing for Ash in the long run. And while it does help Prophecy slightly, especially with the ability to say, hey, I beat so-and-so at so-and-so in so-and-so, so this is what I've proven. But it was a very weird outcome that makes me worry for the future direction of Ash. Second match on the card was Andrew Morris with Seth of Metric against Lucas Bing with Mia Bing in Lucas Bing's debut match on Ultimate Showcase Wrestling pay-per-view. Andrew Morris would go on to win this match in a very shocking conclusion, especially for the fact that there has been rumors he and Andrew Palmer, once their contracts are up later in this summer, they're going to be leaving the company. So unless this is a symbol that he is re-signed, I don't understand why you would put him over this debuting talent you're trying to get over. Especially with, again, the dynamic, I think I've said this prior, but the dynamic of Lucas Bing and Mia Bing being the first brother and sister duo that we've seen on USW. It's not like we've seen plenty of couples debut on USW and have their shtick be the couples or be being couples. And obviously with the Martin brothers and with CED and ED, those are actual real life brothers, right? I think I just messed around my words. No, we've seen plenty of different couples in USW debut as that. We've seen obviously the Martin brothers, CED and ED, Switchblade and Blade are are many examples of actual real life brothers as tag teams in USW. And I think Natalie Dawson and Margot Silva, I think they alluded to them being a couple a few weeks ago on Severity, and nobody began talking about it because they just thought it was kind of like something that they said wrong. But I guess they've been a couple this entire time, and it's just kind of gone under the radar. They haven't made a big deal about it. But we've seen plenty of couples in USW. This is the first brother and sister duo that I've seen in USW, which gives them precedent to go, hey, we managed to be the first to do this, right? So if we can become the first to do something that many people would consider a chance of luck, but also something that's driven by perseverance. What can't we do? And he got him lose to Andrew Morris. I don't see the sense in that, even if you're trying to build Andrew Morris as a credible star, which, very well may be the case. There's the rumor, there was the rumor before the idea that he and Andrew Palmer were not going to re-sign, that the company wanted to, kind of polish him up for the Red Belt Championship picture, which don't know how that's going to work, but okay. One way or another, this match wasn't too great, and I think the ending of what I'm going to say for now was the wrong man going over just kind of made that the icing on the cake. Third match on the card was for the Blue Belt Championship. Mr. Anthony defended the Blue Belt title against Tyreek Carver, who would win the match with the carved template submission. This is a result that I am fairly all right with. Mr. Anthony has had a 4-month reign or so. He didn't need the title long term. His story up to this point has always been he lost at Call to Greatness 13 with the USW title on the line, turned heel, won the Red Belt title, eventually lost that, and then made the climb up into the Blue Belt title picture. But back then, when he started, obviously Dustin Raymond and Dwayne Porter and Tyreek Carver were already completely enamored with the title, and they were firmly in the title picture. So he had to kind of fight through the bushes. And then he finally won the title at a moment that we didn't think we'd see, because we thought Tyreek Carver would hold on to it, or would beat Dwayne Porter and then hold on to it for years. We never thought Mr. Anthony would actually get the chance. But Tyreek Carver, for the past year and a half, since losing the title to Dwayne Porter, has always been about trying to get his Blue Belt Championship back. And so the fact that Anthony won the title nobody expected him to take, or nobody expected him to win, before the guy that everybody expected to be the very next guy in line for the title, made it perfectly fine for Anthony to drop the title tonight. As a matter of fact, not tonight, this past Sunday, but as a matter of fact, I am perfectly fine with this result, because I think it was fine. I think it was perfect. I think at this point in time, for one, I thought Mr. Anthony was going to be the one to dethrone Philip Akron. That didn't turn out to be the case. But nevertheless, we'll get to that later. But nevertheless, I think Mr. Anthony is perfectly groomed for a USW championship run. I don't know exactly how they're going to make that happen, though. The small fact that Philip Akron had a 3-month reign with the title when everyone expected him to do something more with it. I don't know what the reason was for it, but that's how it happened. But people were still also really excited for Suzuki Kirikashi. They were very glad that, for one, the first Japanese-born wrestler in the company is world champion. And for two, the leader of the Promised Land, one of the most consistently well-booked groups in the company's history, is at the top of the mountain. Being able to do what they wanted to do at day one is a great cap-off to the story. However, with that being said, while they were easily able to take the title off of Philip Akron, I don't know how they would get away with doing that for Suzuki Kirikashi. Again, I said it perfectly. I would say at Call to Greatness 14 in Chicago, I walked out with a Packers jersey in Chicago and was booed out of the building. But the second I put my life on, or my body on the line, crowd loved me, right? I could kick a puppy in the face and still be Chicago's favorite son. Unless, I don't know what you can do really right now with Suzuki Kirikashi to make people want him to drop a title. He could kick a puppy in the face right now in this very moment, and people would probably direct their attention towards getting him in the Hall of Fame. He is over as hell despite being a heel, because people just love his work and what he's doing. So Tyreek Carver taking the Blue Belt title off of Mr. Anthony, I am perfectly fine with. Anthony didn't need a long reign, all right? And Philip Akron didn't necessarily need a long reign, but he deserved a long reign. And with that being said, I'm perfectly fine with Tyreek Carver now taking the blue belt title and getting to do what he didn't get to do back in the start of 2018 and going on a long run with the belt. But what you're going to do now is you're going to find yourself with Mr. Anthony. Also, let me just kind of put this little spectrum in your mind. Eli Kaner's coming back. He's over as fuck. He'll continue to be over as fuck. James is going to come back. He is always over as... I mean, he's the fucking face of the company at this rate, right? Coming from one former face of the company to, YouTube and everyone, he is the face of the company. All right. I have no problem with that. I am absolutely fine with that. But with that being said, you've got Eli Kaner. You've got James. Philip Akron's still technically in the picture because he still has that rematch he's afforded. And at the end of the day, now that Zach Hardy's, I'm talking about myself in the third person, but now that Zach Hardy's lost the red belt title, he's a viable option with Metric. Tanner Wallace is a viable option the same way that George Martin is a viable option. Quincy Newsome is an underrated talent that is also a viable option. You could break up the Stargazers today, and I think they would both have a great feud, and then probably be just World Heavyweight Championship material by the time their feud was done. All right, as Rank Hills and Benny Franklin, they seem to want to be going on their own ways. And if Otis Crane were to drop the title at any point in time, he could be implemented into the championship picture. You've got all of those names very capable of making, even if not a run with the title, or even if not a believable outcome where you can go, I could see them winning the title. They'd put on a stellar match with the World Heavyweight Championship on the line, or the USW Championship on the line in this case, right? And still steal the fucking show. It wouldn't feel out of place. It'd still feel like a great world title match. Now you got Mr. Anthony in there as well. All right, and you saw exactly how this worked out with the Blue Belt Championship picture back when you first implemented Mr. Anthony into the championship picture. All right, he had a great run with the red belt title, but there weren't too many people involved in that championship picture. All right, and then he dropped the title. And when he went into the Blue Belt Championship picture, while there weren't too many guys, obviously, as I said, Dwayne Porter, Tyreek Carver, Dustin Raymond were like the three major factors, and I think Simon Saint every now and then. But then you also had Mr. Anthony. It was a fight. It was a fucking... You had to bite and scratch and claw towards getting Anthony through the weed works and into the Blue Belt Championship position, which in it and of itself took about 5 or 6 months. All right, so it took half a year to get Mr. Anthony involved in that way in the championship picture, the Blue Belt Championship picture, with 4, 5 at most guys ahead of him in the ladder. Come on. And you expect him to just be able to get into the USW Championship picture against guys like Kirikashi and Akron and James and Kaner and Quincy Newsome when he gets up there, and Otis Crane when he gets up there, and Zach Hardy, who's already got this DNA kind of right to the title implemented in there already, and then Ezra Kills in there, and Benny Franklin in there. Oh, come on. You expect, for one, you can't expect to just easily implement him into there. And for two, you can't expect to implement him into there without having him lose and not having it hurt him, because it's going to hurt him. All right? So this is going to take a lot of clever booking. But I just don't see how this necessarily helps. While I stated now, Mr. Anthony didn't need a long title reign. Maybe it was for the better. All right, maybe kick up that, Tyreek Carver's quest to get back into the Blue Belt title picture into, 12th gear. Maybe do something like that, but I don't know. I don't think this is a decision that is necessarily going to be looked at in the long run as having been the wrong decision. But I think it's going to be a decision that in the long run will be looked at as something that could have been tweaked out a little bit more thoroughly. But nevertheless, I digress. 4th match on the card was for the USW Tag Team Championships, with Ezra Hills and Benny Franklin defending the titles against Arvo Black and Aiden Ritchie of the Stargazers. This match was, I think, probably one of the most underrated matches on the card. So fluid. Fluid is not a word. So fluidly great. All right, it would just ran smoothly. You could see ripples, but it's not like ripples that were damaging. It was just pretty ripples, great to look at. And the fact that they got the Stargazers the championship belts back is also really great. I'm also really glad that now that Ezra and Kills and Benny Franklin are going out and doing their own thing, or at least that's what it seems like they're going to be doing, I'm very, very happy with the fact that they didn't have one or the other turn on each other. Because I don't think you needed to do that again. And I think we've seen Ezra Hills versus Benny Franklin so much that we can very easily sit back and go, I'm good. I'm fine. I'll be right here. You guys go off and do your own thing. I'm fine watching. I don't need to see you guys fight each other anymore. Just go out and prove what you need to prove. I love that. And the fact that you gave the Stargazers the title back, probably the only team I think in USW today that I can't imagine breaking up. I know many people want to see what Arvo Black can do on his own because he's exciting. And I know a lot of people want to see what Aiden Ritchie can do on his own because he has the physique of a major star, and he has the agility and the ability and everything you could possibly ask for a performer in world championship caliber competition. But I can't imagine Arvo Black and Aiden Ritchie not being the Stargazers. And as a matter of fact, I think it would have been hard if you gave Ezra Hills and Benny Franklin a tag team name all those years ago, because then you would have just associated them with that tag team. Like Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano managed to break out and make their own names, their own individual names known, to the point where you didn't think of both men and then go DIY. Like if you said both men together, maybe DIY would be a thought, right? But if you had Ezra Hills and Benny Franklin as the mug holders, I don't fucking know. I just saw a mug on the top of the fucking microwave. But if you had, Hills and Franklin be the mug holders, right? You'd think of Hills and Franklin for their feud and Hills and Franklin for being a part of the mug holders. But the fact that you gave both men, their tag team name was just their two names, one then the other, right? It gave that sense of individuality that tag teams now don't have. And that was what USW tried to do in the first place. That's when Switchblade and Blade, CED and ED, the Martin brothers, sure, but you still knew they were the Martin brothers, and they were Alex and George. Fernandez and Gringo, who are now the Marvelous Brothers in Arms. But now, that was to promote individuality. So when teams needed to split, they could split amicably without hostility and already have that name brand value there. Jack Ramsey and Austin Cole was another good one in the modern era where they didn't give them a tag team name and tried to see if that individuality aspect stuck. And I mean, maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. But whatever. But now you got the Stargazers, Marvelous Brothers in Arms. You had MP45, Golden Manifesto. Not exactly I'm not exactly sure how well that's going to work out for everybody, but I can't imagine the Stargazers splitting up. And that was a big problem that a lot of people had with the outcome of this match. The fact that the Stargazers are the champions again, right? And obviously now you'd expect them to have either a long championship reign or a moderately short championship reign, right? Something for whatever the fuck it may be, right? Whatever reason it may be, they'd either have a really long reign or a really short reign. And a lot of people still, with the USWA being, obviously the average USWA being you get a long championship reign, people are very confused because the Stargazers have been around for probably getting close to 2 years now. And I think their contracts will be up at the end of 2020, right? So if they get a long reign in, that reign probably ends maybe at Call of Greatness next year in San Diego, or in the few months prior or afterwards, right? But that's still like a 6 or 7 month reign, and people want to see what Arvo Black and Aiden Ritchie can do separately now. So a lot of people are very upset with this switching the guard, because while they know Ezra and Kills and Benny Franklin will kick ass individually, they wanted to see this team last a little bit longer, this reunion last a little bit longer, and also they've already seen what Hills and Franklin are capable of separately. The Stargazers, on the other hand, they want to see what they're made of as singles competitors. But I, in the very, very minority that I belong to, don't want to see the Stargazers break up. Because I can't imagine Arvo Black and Aiden Ritchie without also thinking of the Stargazers. And perhaps they could be the very rare exception, like the Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano, where you don't think of their tag team or their unity or whatever it may be when you hear their names, or at the very least, it's not the first thing you think of. I can't imagine that being the case with Arvo Black and Aiden Ritchie. If there are any performers on the company's roster right now that could prove me wrong in that regard, it would be the Stargazers. But I just can't imagine Arvo Black and Aiden Ritchie without thinking of the Stargazers. I think even for them, it's ingrained in their DNA. When they originally wrote the contract, or signed the contract, they signed on with USW, and they ensured that they would not be split up as a tag team unless both of them collectively agreed upon it, right? So unless both Aiden Ritchie and Arvo Black off-screen, backstage, in negotiations, or in booking direction meetings go, want to split up, want to do our own thing, here's how we want to do it, it's not going to happen. And as a guy, I mean, these guys are very kept to themselves. Not very kept to themselves, but they're not overexpressive about things that nobody necessarily needs to know of. If you ask them, they'll tell you, but they don't necessarily bring up things just in conversations, just like ramble something off in passing. But they don't also necessarily go out and look for conversation. They're very much, they're very much like me. They enjoy doing their own thing, right? And they will talk to people, and they'll be great talking to people, but they don't necessarily aim for that. And that's really the only big reason for the Stargazers and I ever got to talking in depth about personal lives and careers and inspirations, because we had that common thing that not many people have. But I can tell you this very, very much. I don't ever tend to ask about their opinion on singles runs or ever the thought of singles runs, because I know those guys have known each other forever, right? So splitting it up would have to be because it would be better for their own careers separately than it would be to stay together. But just by talking to them and just by knowing their history, I don't know if I can see at any point in time the Stargazers, Arvo Black and Aiden Ritchie, wanting to split up. I don't think they definitely don't feel the need to stand out and become main event stars, right? And if the opportunity were there, they'd probably see what they could take out of it and what they could make out of it just for future work. Like if they were to leave USW in 2024 and go to separate independent promotions. I don't know, one signs with AEW and the other wants to just stick on the indies, right? One's stuck to a contract and the other's just able to do freelance work. I don't necessarily think, unless that were to be the case, they'd feel the need to prove anything to themselves. I think they're very content with USW now, and they were fairly content with USW when they weren't being used as well. But they're extremely content now with what they're doing. I don't see them breaking up at any point in time soon, And so I think this championship reign is indicative to the fact, I've already used that word today, but is very telling of the fact that I don't think there's any real plan on splitting them up. I think this is a telltale sign that they are, if anything, the team that will probably leave the company still never having split up. That's just my thought. Let's see. So, Stargazers, new champions. Fifth match on the card was the Promised Land of George Martin and Tanner Wallace against the New Northern Lights, Blaine North and Samuel North. A sort of continuation of their rivalry from late last year on the Severity brand. This is the New Northern Lights' first match on Intensity pay-per-view, as for the past 2 years, they've both collectively been on the Friday Night Severity brand. This match was fair. There wasn't any stipulation, obviously, for the match. Excuse me. But the Promised Land, Martin and Wallace beat the New Northern Lights. It just hurts the New Northern Lights more. This was supposed to be, wow. For the most part, any Severity performers now on Intensity facing on this pay-per-view any kind of opposition, it sort of felt like this was supposed to be a fresh start. And it didn't necessarily turn out to be that way, at the very least for the New Northern Lights, who fell very short of a victory in a match that they really, really needed to win. The New Northern Lights don't feel special anymore. They don't feel worth the effort of cheering, right? And that's not me to kind of cut down on their quality of work, but as a fan, or if I were just a fan in the crowd watching this, I wouldn't feel the need to cheer them, because I don't think there's anything really unique about them that stands out about them anymore. We've seen teams like them, the Martin brothers, as I said, CED and ED, Switchblade and Blade, teams that were comprised of brothers that had chemistry in the ring as a team because of how long they've known each other. They know each other's every single move, and that works well in the ring. The only problem is, you've got so many tag teams in the company's history, very short history of, comprised of brothers or sisters or whatever it may be, or a brother and sister who also have that thing. So it's not necessarily like they are the only one with that thing that separates them from the roster. They don't have a unique look, nor do they have a unique move set. The fact that their name is the New Northern Lights and their last name was used to, I guess, make their gimmick a geographically colder sort of climate. I don't know exactly. I mean, obviously you have, I guess, the illusion of the North to the North Pole. I don't know. But I guess their thing is they're cold. Like they're, I guess they're inspired by coldness. I'm not even exactly sure how to explain it, and I'm one of the company's main inventors, so you can definitely see where the confusion comes across. They needed this win to feel important and feel special, and they just didn't get it. And I'm starting to worry that they're not going to, because I don't necessarily see the company having a lot of faith in the New Northern Lights. And that's my major worry, because I think they're great when they're given something substantial to work with. But I don't think they've got what it takes right now with their characters, the way they have their characters laid out. I don't think they have what it takes to get over on in-ring work alone. I think they need to have an edge when they cut their promos. I think they need to drop this chili gimmick. I think, again, as I said, a sharper edge in their promos. I think there needs to be a definitive reasoning for why they stick together, because we've seen that Blaine North and Samuel North can be successful apart from each other. Blaine North with the Promised Land. I think he made a Key and Case appearance at one point in time. And Samuel North, who is a former Extreme champion and I think Blue Belt champion, but I'm not sure. And I think he may have fought for the USW title, but I wasn't watching the company's work in late 2016. So, they've proven that they can be separate together. There needs to now be a reason other than, oh, we're brothers. Because obviously George Martin and Alex Martin have proven that brothers don't necessarily have to like each other. But, I'm not even going to make the spousal joke. But there needs to, other than we're brothers, there needs to be a reason given to why the New Northern Lights are teaming. What is their goal? What is the purpose of their team? What is the reasoning behind, or what is the inspiration behind banding together and fighting the common foe? And I don't think they have that right now. And I think if you're going to have them succeed, you're going to get them over in some way as like a viable threat to the Stargazers and their USW Tag Team Championship reign. I think it's going to need to be a desperate measure you take. I think there needs to be something pronto if you hope to salvage the New Northern Lights. Sixth match on the Promised Land won that match, of course. Sixth match on the card was for the Red Belt Championship. This was Zach Hardy defending the title against Otis Crane. Again, as I usually do, I'll talk about myself in the third person, and I'll try to make it as brief as possible. Otis Crane did win this match. It was very much a one-sided affair where Hardy and some of his metric goons decided to beat down on Otis Crane, just kind of injure him, weaken him, so on and so forth, only for Otis Crane to kind of come back and stun Hardy, becoming the new Red Belt champion. Which I have no problem with because I think it's about time. I think it is right about time, as a matter of fact, for Otis Crane to be given something else. He lost the global title. He lost his rematch, got shifted to Intensity. And I think in order to keep that golden fist, warrior thing going, this badass, brutal badass, as I like to call him, that shtick going, he needed to do something quick the first second he got on Intensity, and overwhelming the former face of the company is a really good start. So that is, I think, one of the best decisions on the card. Otis Crane, new Red Belt champion. Seventh match of the card, Peyton Hawthorne versus Taylor Hell. Peyton Hawthorne with the victory, the pinfall victory. That surprised me greatly. I thought Taylor Hell, for all that she had done on Severity, and especially the way her character went from being the silent killer before her World's Women's Championship reign, to then kind of devolving down the rabbit hole of, yeah, I could beat you on my own, but if I have help, it's even easier, so why the fuck not? And then going on to Call to Greatness, where she then kicks the shit out of Cannon and goes down this spiral of craziness before losing the World's Women's Championship to Aphrodite, then losing the rematch and getting shifted to Severity. I think this was the absolute finish of her craziness. I think the story, if you want to look at it from a different perspective, she went crazy thinking that she was all alone on her own again and she wouldn't necessarily keep that title in tow if she couldn't get it together, and she didn't get it together, and she kept not getting it together, so she lost her title and lost the rematch, and it forced her to not only be unable to have another shot at that title, but she's now unable to even look at it, as she's now on a separate brand and show from it, right? And so that craziness kind of came to a conclusion at Retaliation, where she can't have that mentality anymore because it's a new environment. It's a new world. And if she just continues down her old path, she'll never make anything new out of the new scenario she's been shifted in. So I think this was the final stand for the craziness. And I think Taylor Hell is now, I think she's returning to the silent killer that made her great again. And it's going to be interesting to see how she fights that de-evolution into insanity. And the fact that she lost to Peyton Hawthorne, a person that I think at the end of the day, could be one of the first people in line to knock off Alicia Sinclair if given the right kind of momentum and the right shtick, like the underdog that nobody expects to overcome the odds. Right? If she does that, I think this will be looked at as one of the best first steps towards the bigger picture. And I think Peyton Hawthorne has something special. I think she's got something, the moxie, the it factor. I just don't exactly know what the company is cultivating that into. However, I think if you're wanting to legitimize Peyton Hawthorne, this was a great first way to do it, because it may have been a victory against Taylor Hell at her worst, but it was still a victory against Taylor Hell, the former world's women's champion, the first chick to knock off Aphrodite. That is a great first step. Then, of course, the 8th match on the card, the USW Women's Championship. No champion on the show won outright. Alicia Sinclair was the only person to retain their title, and she only retained it because Haley Oster got herself disqualified and didn't really get herself disqualified. Alicia Sinclair got herself disqualified, and Haley Oster won the match. I also fucked up the words. It was Alicia Sinclair that got disqualified. Haley Oster who won the match via disqualification. But nevertheless, I thought that the dirty heel maneuver of Alicia Sinclair with the thumb to the eye and then the slap across the face of the referee, getting herself disqualified, was a brilliant touch. I think it's great. I'm really looking forward to seeing how she ends up making Haley Oster look like this underdog kicking ass to take back what's hers. I'm really excited to see where this path goes, but I can't necessarily expect anything too over the top, really, because I guarantee you it's going to be the way it's usually played out, where the underdog has to overcome all the odds and topple Sinclair. But with Sinclair's history and Oster's history of making something unique out of something played out 1,000 times over, I think it's going to be great. I think they could take I think they would be the kind of people to take even the Cinderella sort of story, where it's like, oh, the princess falls asleep and the prince needs to kiss her in order to wake her up, or some chick's turned into a frog and the prince needs to kiss the frog to have her wake up. Those Haley Oster and Alicia Sinclair are the kind of people to go, you think that's all we can do? And turn that story on its head with something that still keeps true to the ending, and the ending that you would expect, but switches it up and makes it enthralling to watch from start to finish. I'm really excited for what they're doing here, because it's going to make Haley Oster the biggest face in the company, or at least the biggest face in the women's division in the company, and Alicia Sinclair the biggest heel in the women's division of the company, or even the biggest heel in the company. So I'm really excited for this, and I really like the fact that Haley Oster did not lose. She did win. All right, at the end of the day, in the stat column, it does say Haley Oster beats Alicia Sinclair via disqualification. Right, so at the very bare minimum, you get to see Haley Oster with a win next to her name. Even if it's by disqualification, she didn't outright beat the champion, but she did not lose to the champion. She may not have the title, but she did beat the champion. And the champion may not have won, but she still did not lose her title. I think if that whole kind of disqualification sort of, oh, that was anticlimactic, I mean, that works here better than most places I see it. Finally, the match number 9, 9th match on the card, main event of the evening, USW Championship, as I've said in nauseum, all right, or at nauseum, this entire review. Philip Akron defending the USW Championship against Suzuki Karakashi. This result I was extremely happy about. Suzuki Karakashi absolutely deserves this title. The Promised Land feeling like this cult, but never ever being called a cult, is great. I think it's spectacular, right? And there's obviously the comparisons between Promised Land and Metric being drawn, and the fact that they're both in the same brand does not help matters. But both are called a cult. All right, but the difference is, while both do definitely have, like, the reason for both stables existing do definitely sound like a cult, and they sound somewhat similar, right? Zach Hardy, been in the company 10 years, constant success, constant flow of success, never really sees failure, other than with Metric. Surprise and surprise, this hasn't gone well. But these other 6 guys, that now 7, that have never been used before, right, correctly, always poised for world championship possession and world championship success, but never had it long term, follow Hardy to see if some of that success can rub off on them, right? So that's very simple. With the Promised Land, it's Suzuki Kirakashi going to these guys and saying, hey, I know exactly how this business works. I know the ins and the outs. I know how to abuse the system legally and in my favor. If you tag along, you'll find the same success. You just need to trust me, right? Zach Hardy didn't ask for these guys to follow him, and he didn't promise them rags to riches. They followed him in hopes of also finding the way of how to achieve success in the way he has. But Suzuki Kirakashi actively recruited, at the start, Tanner Wallace and Blaine North to be the guys, his bodyguards, helping him find that success, whilst also promising them the success that he eventually finds by that point in time, right? And he had that success with the International Championship, and right as that was going on, the Promised Land won the World Tag Team Championships on Severity. So he brought true to his word then. Now he's the USW champion. How are we going to see Tanner Wallace and now George Martin succeed in that in the long run, right? So Hardy didn't ask for these guys to follow them or to follow him. They just wanted to follow him, hoping for it to better further their careers. Suzuki Kirakashi actively recruited these guys and promised them these riches. Hardy never promised them the riches that they want. They merely volunteered to follow him by choice. Meanwhile, the Promised Land, Tanner Wallace, Blaine North, Samuel North eventually, and George Martin now. George Martin and Tanner Wallace, of course, were told of these riches and followed for these riches and for the possibility of these riches. They're both very cult-like sounding, where one cult leader is like, I just wanted to wrestle. I didn't really want this, but, I mean, fuck it, why not? And the other is like, this is exactly what we're going to do, blah, 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 snorting cocaine off of a stripper's ass crack, something like that, You've got these two very cult-like mentalities with two very different ways of going about their work, all right? And the fact that the Promised Lands works so well, because not only was there the story there, and they both have a reason to exist and a reason to be united, but the Promised Land's message has already been proven. Kirakashi, even if a cult leader can be talked about as, oh, he's a fucking cult leader, blah, 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 he still has proven true to his word. When he was the international champion, finding a moderate success, the Promised Land were world tag team champions, finding moderate success. Even if there was turmoil inside, they still found moderate success. But you never got that major success, right? So Tanner Wallace and George Martin were never key and case holders at the time that Suzuki Kirakashi was world champion, because he never won the world title. He's now won the world title. All right, so it's going to be interesting because because obviously Suzuki Kirakashi won this match. It's going to be interesting to see what Suzuki Kirakashi does going forward after already being true to his word before, how he's going to be true to his word now when the stakes are even higher. But I'm also really excited to just see Suzuki Kirakashi as the champion. The fact that USW really doesn't discriminate against anyone is very telling now in 2019. I mean, Dwayne Porter and Dustin Raymond, two black men, won the USW championship before the first WWE champion in 60 years of the company, right? And they also fought for the title in the main event of Call to Greatness against each other, right? So it was the first black performer only main event world championship match in company history that WWE never saw, right? And people were talking about, oh, well, this company's been around not even 5 years by that point in time, and they already did something that WWE hasn't done in 60 years. But now you have the first Japanese-born wrestler in company history winning the world title, and now you have the first Korean-born wrestler, Choi Ji-Yu, on the Friday Night Severity roster, right? And he's been booked great. So you got a really great future ahead of USW that I think will only just kind of improve their standings amongst the wrestling community and in terms of appreciating pro wrestling, not caring about what your skin color is or what genitalia you tend to like to go down on. Just if you're a good wrestler and you're great on the mic, you're going to be great here. That's awesome. And I love that fact. But the thing I didn't love about the result of this match, of course, is how short Philip Akron's reign was. Man, that's a stroke there. It's been 3 months. This baffles me. This is the guy's first world title reign. All right. This is his first world title reign. And his first world title reign started by beating the guy who held the belt for what was it, 384 days or something like that? AKA the longest reign with the USW Championship in company history. He beat the guy that not only had that reign, the longest reign in company history, but used that reign to essentially be looked at as the new face of the company. All right? He beat John Cena circa 2008. And he gets a 3-month reign out of it. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm fine with most other things, right? Because that's not a problem to me. It doesn't issue me to have him have a short reign necessarily, right? And if it had build, because we're used to these long reigns and they make people feel real special, but sometimes you do need a short reign every now and then just to ensure people the realization that, just because they win the title in February doesn't mean they're going to hold on to it until December, right? It's fine. I'd be fine with him dropping the title with such a short reign if he had build, but he had no build. While people were really happy to see Suzuki Kirikashi in the main event picture, nobody expected him to win. Philip Akron, the guy who beat the face of the company, with the longest reign with a title in company history, can't get one of the shorter reigns in recent memory out of that. Are you kidding me? If the WWE did that with whomever beat John Cena circa 2008, people would have rioted. The company would have been flipped on its head. Titan Towers would have been shattered. Hold on! Shut up! But nevertheless, you get this out of it, which I just find absolutely baffling because it makes no sense and there is no build to it. And it's disappointing because Philip Akron is a guy who deserved better. And while I'm very happy to see Suzuki Kirikashi get his moment in the sun that he's deserved, he's put in a lot of great work and he's done a lot of great work. But the fact that it came at the expense of a championship reign that, whilst short reigns do need to be a thing every once in a while, this is probably the one reign you could go, there's no way to viably, logically make sense of this guy having a short reign. And that's where I have the biggest problem, because I think it's going to hurt Philip Akron in the long run if they don't switch up the dynamic and give him real purpose going forward and this real drive that this animosity comes from that nobody can deny. But nevertheless, I thought it was a fairly good pay-per-view for what it was. I think production was great, and I think the wrestling was great. I think some of the decisions were laughable, and that worries me considering it plays into the idea that USW could be shifting the dynamic and changing up the way they do business in terms of the product they produce. But it was still a good show. a classic USW wrestling sort of show. The outcome of which, though, concerns me slightly, and I won't deny that. However, let me know what you thought of the show in the comments down below. You can go to Twitter and you can tweet at me at ZACHARYSERRA. And you don't want my Instagram. That's pretty very fucking clear. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. I am Zach Hardy, and I am signing off.